Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of this Politics Live, which I think, like a lot of people, coming to you with a bit of a heavy heart because we all found out yesterday. Many of us were shocked and flabbergasted at the news that D'Angelo, who, many of us, I don't know if grew up or were already grown up. A lot of us got an opportunity to enjoy and hear and love his music. I mean, I was already fully grown um, when D'Angelo, kind of first popped up on the scene. Like a lot of people in that early 2000s, which I contend, the more that I think about the early 2000s, as much as the 90s were a great time, and I still stand by the fact that 90s were a great time. So I don't want people. I'm always hitting my mic. I don't want people who grew up in the 90s as I did to think that I'm dissing the 90s at all. I think the 90s were an amazing time. Don't get me wrong. But, in terms of like kind of like a great time span, I would have to say that early 2000s, especially because, from a club standpoint, that was the club time. Now, it's hard for me on a daily basis to decide which was the better club era. The was it the 90s or was it early 2000s? Like early 2000s was a time, and the whole neo soul movement was part of that moment. Now granted, you early 2000s, you definitely had the songs that were like going off. You had Jemele, you had your various hits, Jay-Z, DMX. Like you had all those things that were happening right around that time, but you also had this whole neo soul movement, which had all of us in the chokehold. We was all walking around lighting incense, wearing hair wraps, getting back into natural hair, thinking we was super deep, talking about Grand Rising. That was kind of like our moment. Um, and the music was different. I mean, I think what we sort of miss and we talk about now and complain about is like the fact that the variety. Like it's gonna always be ratchet music. I grew up with ratchet music. Two Live Crew and AMG and all that. That was a regular part of the rotation. But you also had a Tribe Called Quest. You had balance in the force, as they say. And the early 2000s, you had hella balance in the force. When you think about like some of the things, that were in our atmosphere, like Brown Sugar. I mean, Brown Sugar wasn't early 2000s. It was actually mid 90s because Brown Sugar, I forgot, that dropped in 95. And 95 was a time, so I would say for me, we talk about best eras in terms of being outside, really being in the mix. I went to college in 1993. Yes, I'm that many years old. So I went to college in 1993, and I would say that period of from when I graduated in 97 till about 2004, I was a strong 7 years. That was a strong time in my life when it came to going out, being outside, in the moment, all of that. That was that time. And D'Angelo kind of represented this time for a lot of us that we were just getting into adulthood. And I know that some people were a little younger. And you might have been in high school or you might have been just kind of coming into your own in music. You might have been 10, 11 years old. But for me, D'Angelo represented my early 20s. And early 20s, Jemele, y'all ain't want to see that. Y'all did not want to see that. I was hell out here, y'all. I'm trying to tell you. But during that period where it sort of seemed like back to back to back, it was like D'Angelo, Jill Scott, Erica Badu, Music Soul Child, all of them all coming out at the same time. This is our wave of music. We getting our neo soul on. And so D'Angelo was a part of that, like, kind of wave, that early wave where the music was like, yo, we on to something a little bit different here. And as I said, Brown Sugar came out in 1995. So 1995, I'm a sophomore at Michigan State and still living in the dorms. And his album, when that came out, I don't even remember how I heard Brown Sugar, because in 95 people were still actually watching videos. Believe it or not, MTV is now doing away with all their videos, and that just kind of represents an era that was so good to so many of us. So back then we still watching videos, and so when that came out, it just, word of mouth got out. I think I saw the Brown Sugar video somewhere, and then next thing you know, it's our jam. Like, when you go through how many hits were on Brown Sugar, it's amazing. And look, I said this when he first passed. D'Angelo released 3 solo albums. It was Brown Sugar, Voodoo, and Black Messiah. No skips on any of them. Debate Your Auntie with the Sliding Wig. No skips. I put on each one of those albums, and I re-listened to it again. And I'll play them from time to time, because every now and again I'll go through the D'Angelo rabbit hole. And I was just like, he literally didn't have any skips. Even songs that you may have liked a little less than others, you ain't skipping it though. You just gonna let it ride out, because the groove and the music and the emotion behind it is so good. So no skips. You know how hard that is to do. And so, getting back to that year 1995, which arguably, by the way, since we talking about 1995 might have been one of the greatest years in hip hop ever. I'm not saying it's the greatest year, but it was in there. So you had this collision of like the beginnings of the neo soul movement, and hip hop just at its finest. Because like in '95, just thinking about what came out, it was like Raekwon came out, Only Built for Cuban Links, Me Against the World, Pac was out, and let's see, Farside was out, Mobb Deep was out, Goody Mob was out, Bone Thugs was out. I mean, in college, this what we hitting on. And so it sort of takes you back to that moment. And to me, that's the best part of any great artist, is that great artists, is something about their songs that they stick to your ribs. And D'Angelo made the kind of music that stuck to your ribs. And so when I think about some of my favorite D'Angelo songs, it's all things that that aged incredibly well. You put on Lady right now, put on Brown Sugar right now, it's still riding. Still riding. And so I think for a lot of us of a certain era, that where we were, again, we in the streets, we still trying to figure it out, we young in our 20s, this one cut a little bit different than some of the other ones. And that's one of the unfortunate pains of when you get older, is that you start losing people, you start losing bits and pieces of your childhood, of your young adulthood, and it just hits in a much different way. And so for everybody out there, when we all heard the news, this was something different, because for a lot of us that listen to D'Angelo, his first album, second album, like those are some of the times where we either first falling in love, maybe first getting into those real serious relationships, or, just sort of examining and figuring out who we are romantically. and he was kind of a part of that whole maturation process. And, for the younger kids who don't know anything about this and are trying to, process, like, why these old folks out here tripping about this, guy, was he really all that? Yeah, he was all that. But it's because that late 90s, early 2000s time was just so critical in so many of us and so many of our lives. So as I said, I go back to 95. I'm in college. Um, I think I was still in a relationship at that time because I was one of those. I went to college. I actually had a boyfriend, and my boyfriend and I, we both went to Michigan State together. That wasn't the plan. It just kind of, the plan just materialized that way. So I came into college. I literally was the definition of bringing sand to the beach. and, and in that time period of my romantic life, it's like, that was my first serious relationship. We going through a little bit of some ups and downs, and I'm trying to figure out, like, do I want to be in this relationship? And it was nothing that he did or didn't do. It was just the fact that I was young. I was in my 20s. I'm on a college campus with 40,000 um, college students, and you people the same age, which means you're exposed to a lot more of what you're attracted to. So suddenly, these ain't the same old big-headed boys that I went to high school with. These are, on the cusp of being grown men or grown men-ish. And I was certainly like, wow, why am I in a relationship right now? And, D'Angelo was part of this movement of sensuality, but tastefully done, as they say, because he was very different from, I think, a lot of the artists that you see, sort of, definitely a lot of the artists that you see today, because here he was with the straight backs, looking, I mean, that whole sort of sexy thug image was what he was giving off, but sensitive and yet manly. It's like he managed to pull off kind of both of them, and it really was like a hallmark of kind of what, for a lot of women, that seemed to be the perfect visualization of like what we were looking for. It's like, oh, somebody who managed to be, as they say, find you a man who could do both, who can still give off those kind of manly vibes, but yet still y'all cuddle well. So it was this duality and dichotomy that he represented. And a lot of singers are afraid to touch certain classics, but on Brown Sugar, for him to redo Smokey's Cruising and do that in a way that was, that hadn't really, to do that song just as good as the original, is saying something, and to be the age that he was. And so he was set apart. And as I said, the one thing about the 90s and those early aughts, let me call it by its proper name, is that, we had like a lot more variety than I think maybe we've had in other decades and in other iterations. So at the same time you have D'Angelo, you still have Jodeci, like you still have Boys to Men. So you still have like all this variety that you're able to kind of pick from. And so I think that's what made that time and period special. And just to further put it into context, realize too, we talking mid to late 90s, you got movies like Love Jones that are out. Like Love Jones came out in 97. So I think Love Jones came out my senior year of college. And can y'all imagine being in college when Love Jones came out? Some of y'all were in college and had that and know exactly what I'm talking about. So when Love Jones dropped, you want to talk about how suddenly we suddenly everybody into poetry. Everybody, people going to poetry nights, they having poetry nights, like suddenly that was a thing. And this was part of that wave. Like suddenly we wanted to hear, certain music where everything wasn't as flashy, it was a little bit more subtle, and it was the best time. And because in your bubble, especially if you're a black and you're in that bubble of the kind of music that I was talking about, and the movies, we looked at that as like our own version of like the Harlem Renaissance. Had to have movies like Love Jones and Brown Sugar itself, the movie Brown Sugar, right? It's that those were things that we hadn't quite seen ourselves, um, represented in that way. But I think Brown Sugar, the movie, that didn't come out until like '02. And so, like, this idea of the Black romantic comedy was big, late 90s, early aughts. Like, so the music, I think, matched that vibe. It's like that was a time where, unlike now, people were really still trying to fall in love. Like, and people wanted to fall in love. Like, that was kind of the goal, is like, find you somebody to love. And D'Angelo was part of what not only got us in touch with our sort of sensual side, but tastefully, um, but also in part, where I think he probably made, men feel comfortable feeling vulnerable. And so it was, and I mean, and on some other stuff too. It's like you listen to any of his albums, and it's just like the vibe is the vibe is pretty simple compared to now. Wasn't nobody arguing about 50-50 dates. Nobody arguing about who should be paying. People were really just trying to catch a vibe together. And his music, excuse me, was a really big part of that. So as I continue to talk about D'Angelo, I definitely want you all to make sure that you share your memories in the chat about the first time that you may have heard D'Angelo, what he meant to you, how he made you feel. And even, this is the other thing about being in college in that late 90s swing, late 90s, early aught swing, there was certain music that when you went over a dude's, house or apartment or dorm, as we often, did being in college, it was certain albums they had on that you knew it was closing time. You automatically knew. Any dude after a certain period that invited you, like once it came out on DVD, if you get invited over to watch Love Jones, what do y'all think that means? What do y'all think that means? It's like, how long, I mean, especially, once they hit hit the video and DVD sales market. You know how long it took me to actually see. I saw the movie in the theater, but how long it actually took me to see the full movie when the DVD hit took a while. That was the tried and true. Nobody made it through Love Jones. If you were on some, what was our version of Netflix and chill, then you were not making it through Love Jones. If you made it through Love Jones with the person you wanted to be with, you didn't like that person. It was just, that's just what it was. But definitely, if you come over a dude's crib and he playing Brown Sugar, playing that album, you're like, oh, I see somebody's trying to close the deal. I see what's going on. So it was just a shame, and especially because D'Angelo was so young. I mean, 51, and especially if you're of my generation, being a full-fledged Gen Xer, uh, that's young to me. I have peers that are the same age. I'm knocking on the door of that age. And cancer is no joke, but especially pancreatic cancer. That's one of the more deadly cancers that we have out there, and that's what D'Angelo died from after battling it as long as he could. And what I think is important, beyond just this giving us an opportunity to reminisce and think about his music and think about the various points in our lives where his music was our soundtrack, the other part that we have to really think about is the lesson that we're supposed to learn from a health perspective, especially Black men. And, all I can say to all the Black men who might be in this chat right now is I really hope that you all are taking care of yourself. Please take care of yourself. Don't, I've seen a lot of people, a lot of women say, and they say this about the men that they have in their lives is, husbands, boyfriends, that kind of thing, even fathers, brothers, is that, don't solely put the responsibility of your health on someone else. Meaning, yes, if you have a significant other and they can go to the doctor with you, it's great to have that additional pair of eyes, somebody else to give you additional feedback. But it's important that you take control and you be a leader when it comes to your health. I know there's a lot of stigmas. A lot of men sometimes are scared. Not, they're just scared of finding out that something is wrong, especially if they haven't been to the doctor in a long time. But you have to be proactive about your health, particularly once you get to a certain age where it makes all the sense in the world to be proactive. Get your colonoscopies. Make sure you're getting blood work done every year, because catching things before they get to a serious level is a big part of your healing. It's a big part of why there is a difference between sometimes people living and people dying. So I especially want Black men to take care of themselves, not just physically, but also mentally, because I know, especially in this time, there's a lot of strain that you're dealing with. You don't always feel comfortable sharing that, particularly, not with the women in your lives, because I get it. All of you, a lot, men in general have been conditioned to be superheroes. There are other men who are afraid to share some of their insecurities, their doubts, their vulnerabilities, because, yeah, unfortunately, some of them have dated women who weaponize these feelings against them. And women, we have to start doing that. Like, we play a role in bettering their mental health as well. While it is not our, responsibility to play therapist, the one thing that we can do is make sure the men in our lives, whether we be romantically involved with them or not, that they feel comfortable being able to share things with us. And if we are using that information in a way that makes them feel unsafe to share it, then we got to check ourselves. 100%. We have to check ourselves. And so, on one end, we can't say we want men to share, and then the moment we do, we weaponize it. We can't do that. And, so I just hope that this is an opportunity for Black men, if you haven't been to the doctor, to go to the doctor, get your yearly checkup, and make sure that you're staying on top of it. Don't leave all the burden of your health on the person you're with. Number one, that's not only unfair to them, but two, is that in order for you to take the best care of yourself, you have to be equally as proactive. I'm off my soapbox. But I thought, in light of what's happened to him, and we've lost other legends recently that have been around the same age. And, people have wondered, what is this larger trend of losing, Black men around a certain age? Because I still think, if I'm not mistaken, that Black men of the racial groups in America have the lowest life expectancy. I think it's still Black men. And we know some of that is just from the societal stress of just being Black. That adds an additional level of stress, not just for Black men, but also for Black women, but especially for Black men. And so, knowing that, I think it's important, more important, that you all engage in self-care. And when I say self-care, I don't mean, going to get a massage or manicure, pedicure. Yeah, you can do those things. I think part of self-care is actively or being proactive about your mental and your physical health. So again, off my soapbox and ready to get back to D'Angelo and sharing some more, memories about that. As I said a few minutes ago, the best parts about listening to somebody like him is that it takes you back and transports you to a moment in time, which I think the best music tends to do. And I remember when Voodoo dropped his follow-up album to Brown Sugar. And I think there was this, and that dropped maybe about 5 years later. So we in the early aughts now. And I think there was this sort of feeling of like, how can he do it again? Can he do it again? Can he make an album that is just as good as Brown Sugar? And he did. And some would argue that Voodoo was better than Brown Sugar. I'm willing to have that argument with y'all right now because, y'all, I know will correct me, but as much as I love Voodoo, and it was such a masterpiece, because when you listen to the variation of sound between Brown Sugar and Voodoo, it's pretty obvious. But I don't know. It still feels like Brown Sugar is a better album than Voodoo. Listen, if we just went down, now granted, I will say this: Brown Sugar, one of the biggest things that it has in its favor is the fact that it's not that many songs on Brown Sugar. I think it's 10 songs, right? Compared to Voodoo, which is a much more, comprehensive, bigger album. I think the overall brilliance of the album is just brilliant again from start to finish. And he did another cover when he did, Feel Like Making Love, which he did as good as the original. And some of the artists, or the fact that this is a project that he worked on with Questlove, and he took a really big swing and he nailed it. But when I think about both albums, I just feel like Brown Sugar is better. Like it doesn't. I'm not comfortable ranking Voodoo ahead of that, even though I do understand why people say that Voodoo was better. Now, Voodoo, I think it had about 13 tracks. And, like One More Again is one of my favorites. I love Devil's Pie. Spanish Joint, The Root. Like it's so many, Left and Right with Meth and Red. Like Send It On. It's so many great songs on this album. But for some reason, I cannot rank Brown Sugar ahead of it. And I agree with this comment I'm about to pop up now. Voodoo was a more diverse album. I completely agree. It was a more diverse album. As I said, it was a bigger swing. He took a bigger swing with that one than he did with Brown Sugar. But when you start going down the track list of Brown Sugar, it's just like, I don't know. It's just such a tough call because it starts with Brown Sugar. Then you get to All Right. Then you get to Jones in My Bone. Me and Those Dreaming Eyes of Mine. One of my favorite songs. Shit Damn Motherfucker. Another one. Then it's Cruising. Then it's When We Get By. And then it's Lady. It's like, he don't give you no room to breathe. You fighting for your life. You're not coming up for air. Okay? It's impossible. Now, I like this analysis from Thomas Breeze. Voodoo is D'Angelo's Sign of the Times. Jemele is bugging. I probably am. You're right. I love Sign of the Times. Is it my favorite Prince album? Probably. I'm just gonna say probably. But I feel like it's a cheat code in a way, Sign of the Times, because Purple Rain is just come out swinging. So anyway, I just go back and forth. And it feels wrong to me to put Brown Sugar second to be Voodoo, but I get why a lot of you do it. But this is what makes this feel so bad, is that then we go to his third album, which came out like 15 years later, and you have Black Messiah, right? And Black Messiah automatically, for everybody, you just automatically put in that third. It's like, and it's no disrespect to Black Messiah, which is a masterpiece. Because I don't know about you all, but I was a little concerned because of the length of time that went between Voodoo and Black Messiah. Like, oh, I don't know if he got it. But Really Love, ain't that easy? Fighting for Your Life. Those are insanely good songs. I mean, all of them are. Like, again, that's another one. The Charade, like, you put on that album, Black Messiah, you ain't going nowhere. no skips, no skips, right? And so I think it's tough that I feel like Black Messiah gets slighted. You know what Black Messiah feels like to me, if I may speak in a little wireese, as in The Wire, the greatest television drama ever. Don't debate me. Debate your grandma who got holes in her pantyhose. The thing about, you know, this is where it makes sense for me in terms of thinking about The Wire. A lot of people hated season 2 of The Wire because it was so different than what people had been accustomed to seeing in season 1. Season 1 is firmly about setting you up, the Barksdales, whatever. And season 2, all of a sudden, it's like, where these white people come in the docks? But season 2 is the bridge season that brings The Wire together. It helps you understand how the drugs get there, the role of labor, unions. Like it's a whole thing that ties the rest of everything together. And so when you start ranking The Wire seasons, you might go 4-3, season 4, season 3, or you might go season 3, season 4. Some might say season 1. But season 2, I think the biggest crime of season 2 was just that it wasn't the other great seasons. That being said, I feel like Black Messiah is kind of in that same boat. Black Messiah gets ranked 3rd because it isn't Voodoo or Brown Sugar. Now, some people, this is not saying that everybody feels that way. There are some people who feel as if Black Messiah might be their favorite. So I'm certainly not speaking for everybody. But consistently, what I've seen when people started ranking D'Angelo's album is Black Messiah was 3rd, despite the fact it holds its own individual brilliance. So it's tough. But I do know this, there's very few artists, especially in the genre that he was in, that can produce 3 albums out the gate like that. And that there's even the Brown Sugar versus Voodoo debate feels very much like the Godfather 1 and 2 debate. Like, a lot of people think Godfather 2 was better than the first Godfather. I disagree, but I understand how they got there, and I'll allow it. Same thing with Voodoo. So when you produce 3 great works like he produced, then you are doing something right as an artist. And the thing is, despite the fact that the time changed, when you think about that time between 2000 and 2014, 15, when he put out Black Messiah, and how much music changed in that decade plus, for him to still put it down the way he did, to evolve, but yet not kind of change. He gave you everything that you wanted if you were a hardcore purist D'Angelo fan, and then gave you something more if you wanted to see how he could stretch himself in Black Messiah. And so even though the first 2 are masterpieces in Voodoo and Brown Sugar, I probably respect Black Messiah the most because of when he chose to do it and how that balanced against the music of the moment during that time. And so it's hard not to respect somebody who was able to approach his craft the way that he did. And yeah, I mean, I think we get reminders all the time about how these little bits of our lives are, slipping away and that kind of thing. Or at least, now that we're in that stage where you begin to bury people and see people pass, who in your mind you feel like they're going to live forever, and then they don't. And so it is, it's hard from that standpoint to kind of see this unfold, especially, at such a young age, at 51 years old. But, I just wanted to pop on here real quick and just say a few words about D'Angelo, give people an opportunity to share their own experiences and what they thought made him special. Let's also not forget that some of the things that he wrote and produced as well, which includes, I'm sure you all remember, You Will Know. And I think that was on the Jason's Lyric soundtrack. And D'Angelo was the one who wrote that song. I mean, it was that song was tremendous, number one. And when you look back and think about all of the people who are on that song and realize You Will Know came out before Brown Sugar. So really his entry point into the business in which people knew about him in a major way was You Will Know. Because, boy, that was a time, man. These young kids, they will never know about that time. Back when when the soundtrack and the movie were, well, actually, in a lot of cases, the soundtrack was better than the movie. I mean, Jason's Lyric was a good, entertaining movie, though it doesn't necessarily age the best, but it was interesting. It was good for its time. Like we were all into it for sure. Just Jada Pinkett and Alan Payne having a Houston accent is hilarious. Meanwhile, Bokeem Woodbine does not. I don't know what accent that is. He ain't even got no accent. He is showing up as Bokeem Woodbine as he does in every movie. But the Jason Lyric soundtrack, first of all, can we talk about how banging that soundtrack was to begin with? I mean, on top of You Will Know, they also had Casey doing his cover of Bobby Womack's If You Think You're Lonely Now. I've had this debate 5 billion times. I will die on this hill. I will put this on everything I love. And you know when Black people say that, we dead serious. I will put this on my mama. Casey's version of If You Think You're Lonely Now is better than Bobby Womack's. I said it with my chest poked out fully. It is better. Don't at me, don't debate me. It is better. Okay. I'm not saying that Bobby Womack doesn't do a good job. And by the way, when you listen to the lyrics, it's the greasiest song ever. It's like unbelievable. But Casey did that on that song. But that entire soundtrack of Jason's Lyrics, you have You Will Know. I remember If Trouble Was Money, Mint Condition. Let's see. Forget I Was a G. Man, they had some tracks on there. And You Will Know was one that included at the time all the best R&B singers of that time on one song. And so when we think about some of the great anthems that we've seen from groups, by the way, when is the next time we're ever going to see that again? I don't know when. I don't know if we'll ever see it again, because I think that time and that era has passed where you're going to see all the best of one particular craft get on one song that has a broader, more uplifting message. We ain't seeing that. See, I see all of y'all already. Y'all already ready to ride out on me about my KC take versus Bobby Womack. Go listen to the song. Listen to it back to back, people. KC did a better version of If You Think You're Lonely Now. He did. And really, I mean, KC is low and high key one of the greatest R&B singers ever. Like vocally, are you kidding me? It's like the soul is oozing off of him. Like he just brought it from deep down in North Carolina, places we don't even know about. But it just, all of that entire period, D'Angelo is like the perfect sort of bat symbol for what that period was about. The soul of it, the emotion of it, the texture of it. When you can vividly remember the first time you heard songs, or what songs you listened to when you were going through particular heartbreaks, or maybe even big romances. Like that's when, romantically, I think a lot of us, we was taking some big swings. Definitely had some big misses, but it felt like, that was like sort of as a young person, it felt like the best time to be in love, because you had music and movies that sort of supported what you were going through in the moment. Y'all are cracking me up. I am entirely right. I know. So don't hate the messenger. My bad. I didn't mean to make y'all uncomfortable on a Wednesday, but I'm right. And y'all know I'm right. Y'all just don't want to admit it. I get it. You don't want to let go. Anyway, I just want to thank you all for joining me here for this, our version of a memorial. Because one thing, I promise I'm going to end it after this. One thing that was kind of heartbreaking about D'Angelo, and I wouldn't just say him, but if you think about it now, when any major figure that represents our community dies, whether they be in entertainment, politics, whatever it may be, there's nowhere where we can go and really, like, what D'Angelo dies, what news channel are you turning to get more details? Like, we don't have that. Not for us, anyway. As somebody had brought this up, and I hate picking on a BT and something like, yes, of course, like any network, they deserve their criticism for sure. But kind of the downside of when you eliminate news programming, because even I will say this for MTV. Remember how back in the day when MTV did videos and they also did news breaks, I think every hour on the hour or every half hour, that you would, when Kurt Loder broke in with some breaking news, you knew shit was serious. Something happened. You knew immediately whatever it was to stop them from playing a bunch of videos, and Kurt Loder had to tell you what the hell was happening. You already knew what time it was. And none of these channels that are allegedly about music have any music coverage at all. And so, and we know that mainstream legacy media is not going to cover it. I mean, they'll cover it eventually. Like, I know that ABC News did something on D'Angelo, and they'll give it some level of treatment. But when it happens, yeah, you can run to social media, but generally speaking, we have nowhere to go. And social media is fine. But in terms of, like, somebody say TMZ or whatever, okay, I'll give you that. But I don't think it's the same as what it used to be, because, excuse me, because when BET was still BETing, if this happened during the Bob Johnson time, BET would have broke in and they would have shelved every video they had coming up. And instead, they would have played D'Angelo all day, had people from video. Donnie Simpson would have broke in and said, hey, or Ed Gordon, and told us what was going on. But that's not the time that we live in now. So it's just really very different. Anywho, thank y'all for letting me spend this time with y'all. It was a lot of fun. Keep that D'Angelo playing. I know I'm going to be riding out to him for many more hours and days, because, we deserve our memories and our remembrances, and it's taking us back to a special time. So y'all keep playing the music, keep doing what you're doing, and I will see y'all later on. Take care.